G'day legends, I hope you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic weekend. At least you'll be having a better weekend than Mr. Trump or maybe Mr. Xi Jinping. As we've seen, the trade, the tariff, the sanction war between America and China, this has just gone ballistic in the past 24 hours with China having basically blanket rare earth restrictions and magnet restrictions. And this impacts everything from the tungsten in bullets all the way through to even cancer treatments, but also to make any high-end equipment from Tomahawk missiles to F-35s. And Trump is responding, of course, very, very hard on this too. But at the end of the day, we need to talk about this is in response to America's then tariffs that came in. So we'll look over all of that. That's going to be the bulk of this video today. But we're going to talk about the blackouts in Ukraine, large energy strikes both from Russia into Ukraine, Ukraine into Russia, a large attack overnight. Of course, we'll look at the maps, some geolocations, and some areas of which have had large amounts of attacks and armour and a withdrawal as the weather may have permitted this to take place. Okay, so a lot, as always, to go over. Let's start at the strikes. We'll do the maps and then we'll do US, China, what is going just chaotic in that, okay? So it's always a very difficult thing to get any reasonable numbers on the amount of drones, the amount of missiles, especially interceptions. Sort of don't bother on the interceptions, but we see Mr. AMK mapping. He does a great job on this. Now you can see the amount of Iskander M's. Of course, these are the ballistics, the Iskander K, these are the cruise. Of course, the Iskanders are getting more and more difficult to intercept, not only from a reduction in the air defense, but also an increase in the capacity of the system and numbers of the systems. But what you can see is these overnight targeted a lot of power plants all throughout Ukraine. He says, AMK says, interception rates are currently unknown, but very low. And the number of missiles launched is higher than what he's listed here. We do know there was a lot of missiles overnight. Widespread power outages are reported across Ukraine, with approximately 50% of Kyiv without electricity. Zelensky said some hard words about the mayor today. Garan 2 drones also struck numerous targets, including ones not targeted by missiles, and there was a lot of these in the air. But this isn't just Kyiv. We'll go over. This is the Mayor Vitaly Klitschko from Kyiv. Said that a new attack by Russian invaders is expected in the coming days and urged residents of the capital to stock up on water and food. So not this just attack, but there will be more of this. The situation is complicated, and let's tell the truth, not engage in any complacency, because the enemy does not stop. A new attack is predicted in the coming days. Stock up on food, your water, your autonomous power devices, prepare warm clothes, and Kyiv experienced one of the most difficult attacks in terms of consequence. Energy workers have already restored power to some 420,000 consumers. And we see this is similar in Lviv too. Lviv delays start of the heating season follow the Russian strikes. So from the mayor there, the current situation in the country means we cannot begin supplying heat for the next few weeks. We need to wait a little to ensure everything is done properly so homes stay warm in winter. And he's urged residents to prepare for alternative sources of heating and to help others who are unable to do so on their own. We're going to check all your resource system supplies and response speed. And again, this is the thing. If you're less reliant on gas or you can't get the gas, you're more reliant on electricity. But then there's this tit for tat of strikes. And Zelensky, he has spoken about this. The head of Russia is clearly taking advantage of the moment, while the world is entirely focused on the prospect of establishing peace in the Middle East. Most countries, all key leaders, have their attention fixed on what's happening there. So he's saying that you've taken this opportunity to intensify, as he says, terrorist strikes at a moment like this. Nearly 500 drones were launched in multiple waves, 200 of them Shahid Garan, 32 missiles, mostly ballistics. Only one response can be given to this: more strength, more air defense to protect our critical infrastructure. So we need more air defense to intercept this as more missiles are coming. Apparently, in March 2022, no missiles were left, so I don't know what is being flown around. Now, from the reports that I'm seeing, these attacks injured 20 and they killed 1. And any killed or injured, of course, in these of civilians is absolutely tragic. But what I will say is when we look over at the Middle East, we look at strategic strikes, when we look at the non-combatant casualty value rates of then the killed, the wounded, It is a credit to the shelters in Ukraine, the discipline of people going to shelters, the air defense, but it's also a credit to restriction of targeting as well. Now, I know people all over Twitter, all over Instagram, all over whatever, will be saying that these strikes are specifically going for civil targets. Energy facilities are, under international law, dual-use targets. If it was going for residential blocks to just inflict civ CAS, you would not be getting 20 injured and 1 death. You'd have what we've seen in other sectors around the world. That doesn't justify any of this. No, I hate strategic strikes in general, and I don't want to see any war. Anyone who follows me or knows me knows that. But we need to be realistic about it also. But what's the future of this? We have just an image here of one of the power plants that has been struck, and you can see sort of the electrical fire going. But I do believe these tit-for-tat strikes, Ukrainian, Russian, that these will continue in the coming weeks, the coming months. Both Kyiv, Europe, and even the US, they've been very public, very clear that the only way to bring Moscow to the table is through strikes against their energy facilities and their basically money-producing energy facilities, and that what this will do is it will persuade Russians, it will persuade people to rise against Putin and force their hand to end the war. Even if what I've said, historically, strategic strikes more cement this, but again, we will see. But this is the only path to victory being spoken of. Military victory, this is not spoken of anymore. This is a thing of the past. The hopes of that went away in 2023. So what is being spoken of is these strategic strikes. This will bring victory. And of course, many people speak of air truce, and that's why I think an air truce is fairly unlikely, because if that comes into play, well, then what is the strategy? What's being sold on how you're going to achieve a victory? But the air truce too, I don't see it being attractive to the Russians or the Ukrainians. Of course, the reduction of suffering is, of course, incredibly attractive, but as far as ways to then multiply battlefield effect, no. The problem is that I see is the air truce may be somewhat more attractive to the Russians, because the Russian long-range drones, the Garand-style drones, these have been shown to be redirected from strategic targets to tactical battlefield targeting. Whereas I have not seen Ukraine's long-range drones that a lot of resources go into, they've not shown this capability. They've been very effective against long-range targets, but they've not been shown to be then of like a tactical use on the front line. And the question will be, who can survive the most amount of pain this winter? And Moscow is acutely aware of the impact on gas prices, the limiting of gas in Ukraine, therefore your restriction of gas supply and demand, so rising gas prices throughout Europe this winter, and especially then states like Austria, Hungary and Slovakia, and how they are seeing a reduction of Russian gas into Europe, which is only half true. There's actually been an increase in, say, France's imports, and how that can force hand. So I just don't think at this point there's attraction to an air truce, but I don't see on a larger strategic impact that either Russia or Ukraine is going to step away from these. Now, let's have a look at the maps, and then we'll talk about US and China. We'll start at Pokrovsk, but of course, we'll start zoomed out. Here's Ukraine, center of screen, capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22, purple since 2014. Any red check, that is Russian ground over the past 24 hours. Blue check would be Ukrainian ground, but we only have a red check on the map today. So we'll come down into Pokrovsk. You see just a little bit heading out in the direction of Minograd. We've seen grey zone out into these sectors for some time, but no significant shifts on this. But let's look at this northern sector, as this has always been very unclear of what is happening here. And of course, media blackout has limited a lot of footage, but we do have a little bit more today. So what I've said is the weather was very poor over the past few days, and both Russia and Ukraine have taken advantage of this poor weather. Deep State map, they've said this: the enemy continued mechanized attacks on Volodymyr yesterday and managed to land in a large assault force. Now, remember Suryak's map yesterday that everyone said, this is bullshit propaganda, when he showed this? Again, I will say Suryak's reputation is very, very good. Everyone gets things wrong, but it seems like he was correct in this. Unfortunately, assault actions on Volodymyr continued yesterday. According to updated data, around 12 o'clock, there were not 4, but at least 7 armoured fighting vehicles. Around 3 p.m, there was another attack with 7 armoured fighting vehicles. After 5 p.m, the enemy sent 2 tanks towards the village. Thus, at least 16 armoured vehicles and 6 motorcycles were involved in the assault actions. An additional problem is the landing of an assault force. The enemy brought 50 to 75 infantrymen into the village. The situation remains difficult. Remember, situation remains difficult. If my surgeon ever tells me that, or a doctor ever tells you that, you're in strife. The enemy will try to take full advantage of the worsening weather conditions. Now, no, maneuver warfare has not re-entered the battlefield. I'll show you why in a second, but the poor weather may make it opportune for specific times. So movement into Volodymyrivka in the direction of Shakhovka. Now, I can't show you the footage here, but again, if you'd like to see it, please go onto my Telegram channel, linked below. You can see the tanks and you can see the motorcycles in a combined warfare maneuver into this area. Of course, footage coming from then an interesting logo down in here. But this isn't the whole story that we have today. So we come on the northern side. We have Rodyanske, Pokrovsk, and this road heading down here, one of the last remaining roads. But what have we heard about? We have been telling you for months the survival rate of this road is reported from Ukrainian sources at 50%. And also how this supplies up into the north, Rodyanske, Krasny Liman, but down into Pokrovsk itself. And this is on the northern side of Pokrovsk. So we see this footage here. Now, what this is showing is Ukrainian vehicles after attacks and logistics into these areas. We see multiple of them here, from both armoured military-style vehicles to your Civ-type four-wheel drives as well. We zoom around. This is how we get the geolocation of this intersection. You can see multiple of these, both past and present, some of them still remaining on fire. And this is geolocated down into this area here. So Thorkill, who is one of the best ones for tracking this area, has said this is the result of fierce battle for control of this intersection. The wrecks of Ukrainian vehicles are visible in the video. BTRs, BMPs, BVFs, Strikers, all these vehicles are a result of weeks of fighting and at least several Ukrainian counterattacks aimed at pushing Russian assault groups out of the intersection area, which has changed hands at least twice. The vehicles belong to several Ukrainian units fighting there of these. So there's a lot of fighting, a lot of obvious grey zone into this area, but we know those longer range drone units operating in here, like Rubicon 2, making supply very, very difficult. Again, this is where pockets like this don't scream a 10-to-1 attrition ratio. It doesn't even scream 1-to-1. So keep an eye on this whole sector. And what we have said is Russia was getting cut off in Dorozhne, Nikhorovka area, but you can counter this by the eastern side gaining Shakhovka, Volodymyrivka, cutting off in Sofivka in the direction of Druzhkivka as well. Now we have one more update, very minor update actually in here today, just Suryak map on Pokrovsk actual. Russian army assault the western part of Novopavlivka, just up this train line down in here. So this area, Novopavlivka, but nothing really to speak of. We'll wait for more updates on that. Now let's have a look at the remainder of the map. So we see there is some red check around the Berezove, Verbove, Poltavka area in Oleksivka. We do have one update on this front from Suryak. It is showing on this front during the last 48 hours, Russian secured positions recently taken south of Oleksivka. In addition, clashes with the Ukrainian army continued at Novoselivska and Yanavarska. So just to the northeast of here, Yanavarska and Novoselivka, where Ukraine did push back into Sosnivska area, but from Verbove in the direction of Oleksivka, which we did see Russian geolocations the other day. We're also seeing breaking into Poltavka. Some are claiming that area is under control. We do know this Uspanivka, Novohorovka area, a lot of this is likely having break-ins or under control, depending on the geolocations and mappers that you are looking at. Let's go then into Konstantinivka, and this is where Ukraine has used the poor weather conditions. This Kateranivka front line. Now, what we've been told for some time is that this area has been cut off and resupplied by drones, and Ukraine need to pull back across this waterway. And we said this could be an absolute bloodbath, but it looks like, according to Mr. Playfair, Ukraine has taken the opportunity of the poor weather and the fog to move out of this area. Ukrainian forces retreated by boats through the Klumbuk Reservoir, unexpectedly suffering low casualties. This would have been very, very daring. Again, poor weather doesn't go well with electronics and drones. Russian forces have not yet entered or cleared the positions abandoned by the Ukrainians. In total, only a few dozen Ukrainian soldiers remained in the fields south of the reservoir when their retreat route was cut from Klimbuk some days ago. Now, Russia used this fog to move north of Pokrovsk, as I just showed you, and it looks like Ukraine may have used it to retreat on this front. So if Mr. Playfair is correct, we may see this step up in the next few days. So let's continue our way up actually into then this Seversk area, and we have Yampil right here, and this is where Surak is saying Russian army continue advancing inside Yampil, taking control over the cemetery. We can see, of course, grey zone heading into here. They are building and building on this northern side and the southern side of Siversk. Then we come into Sumy, an area not much spoken about, but of course still very important. Oleksivka, that was reported under Ukrainian control, is still shown under Russian control by the Ukrainian map. So again, this has more reason for us to believe that, if that makes sense. Sumy front, in the last 2 days, Ukraine army continued advancing in Oleksivka, taking control of the warehouses west of the locality. On the other hand, Russian army recaptured some of the lost positions south of the lakes area. So in and around this area of the lakes and Oleksivka, Ukraine pushing back on that sector. So again, we see where the maps are shifting, where difficult situations, I use the term there myself, where there is very, very hard situations occurring, where there is squeezing on areas. But, of course, in a global economy, when something pushes, something pulls. And we do know that over the past few years, there's been very large dividing lines between the West, global South, where Russia and China are sitting, where US is sitting, and even the US outside of where the other Western states are, and that this all has effect. Now, we're going to look over to both America's actions, China's retaliatory actions, America's retaliatory actions, what Trump is saying, and how this is going to affect not only America, but then the flow-on effect to the countries, of course, where American weapon systems go. You may hear a lot about Tomahawks recently. Well, the Center for Strategic Studies specifically points out Tomahawks are going to be a bit of an issue. Now, Donald J. Trump at Real Donald Trump has truth.come to this. It has been learned that China has taken extraordinary aggressive position on trade in sending extremely hostile letters to the world, stating that they were going to, effective of November 1st, 25, impose large-scale export tariffs on virtually every product they make, and some not even made by them. This affects all countries without exception and was obviously a plan devised by them years ago. It is absolutely unheard of in international trade and a moral disgrace in dealing with other nations. Now, what happened in April where there was blanket tariffs put on all allies, all enemies, all everyone? I don't know. Everyone has amnesia. Based on the fact that China has taken this unprecedented position and speaking only for the USA and not other nations who are similarly threatened, starting November 1st, 25, or sooner, depending on any further actions or changes taken by China, the United States of America will impose a tariff of 100% on China, over and above any tariff that they are currently paying. Also, on November 1st, we will impose export controls on any and all critical software. It is impossible to believe that China would have taken such an action, but they have, and the rest is history. Thank you for your attention on this matter. And what we've seen is crypto markets have had a large drop. The S&P 500 has had a large drop. Is it in crash territory? Absolutely not. It's still a few percent. But still, that few percent is a hell of a lot of money. But I think this sums up what we are seeing happen a lot at the moment. Now, let's go through his next tweet on this, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty specifics. Some strange things are happening in China. They're becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries around the world. They want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths and virtually anything else they can think of that is not even manufactured in China. Nobody's seen anything like this. Essentially, it would clog the markets. We've seen something like this very similar. But again, this is going to have large issues. And what I will say is the US is not about to take drastic actions against Russia, another massive resource producer, while this is happening. It can have huge global effect. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. Now, remember when Trump made that truth.com or the tweet or whatever it bloody is about, while Russia, Iran, North Korea and China all come together to go against the US, I wouldn't say your relationship has been brilliant. There is no way that China should be allowed to hold the world captive. But that seems to have been their plan for quite some time, starting with the magnets and other elements that they have quietly amassed into somewhat of a monopoly situation, which absolutely it is. I'll show you this in a sec. The US has monopoly positions also, which they do in some areas. The letter they sent was many pages long, detailed with great specificity, each and every element they wanted to withhold from other nations. I've not spoken to Xi because there's no reason to do so. It was meant to be in South Korea and have a meet with Xi. He says, basically, I don't see the point in it. Again, diplomacy falling apart. I'll be forced, the president of the US, to financially counter their move. For every element they've been able to monopolise, we have two. That's incorrect. I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps, as all things, time has come. Ultimately, although potentially painful, it will be a very good thing in the end. The USA, and one of the policies that we are calculating at this moment, is a massive increase on tariffs on Chinese products coming into the US. Now, I've reached out to Dr. Connolly and I'm hoping to get a breakdown on exactly what effect this is going to have. But on these rare earths, China does have an absolute monopoly. Now, does America have a lot of these? Yes. But the refining is a problem. Also, how dirty it is to do. And again, there seems to be this idea that you can just cut off and then just start making these straight away. That's just not the case. It's going to take a very long time. Can the US replace this sovereignly? Yes. It's not going to take weeks, not going to take months. It's going to take years, and it's going to be significantly more expensive. Significantly. Now, this is a great breakdown of it here from the Centre for Strategic Studies and International Centre for Strategic and International Studies. So, China announced it has expanded its restrictions on rare earths and permanent magnet exports. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce announcement, number 61 of 25, implements the strictest rare earth and permanent magnet export controls to date. What is new about today's rare earth and permanent magnet exports? The new export controls mark the first time China has applied the FDPR, the Foreign Direct Product Rule, a mechanism introduced in 1959 and long used by Washington to restrict semiconductor exports to China. So you can see why Trump's somewhat like filibustering about this rhetoric. You're like, well, and back to this a little bit. The FDPR enables the US to regulate the sale of foreign-made products if they incorporate US technology, software, or equipment, even when produced by non-US companies abroad. In effect, if US technology appears anywhere in the supply chain, Washington can assert jurisdiction. And we see this being used as sanctions without sanctions all the time. Under the measures announced today, foreign firms will now be required to obtain Chinese government approval to export magnets that contain even trace amounts of Chinese origin rare earth materials. Licensing framework will apply to foreign-produced rare earth magnets and select semiconductor materials that contain at least 0.1% heavy rare earth elements sourced from China. Given China's dominance in the sector, accounting for roughly 70% of rare earth mining, 90% of separation and processing, so that like refining, I guess you would call it, and 93% of magnet manufacturing, these developments will have major national security implications. And this is major, and this can't be replaced overnight like many would like to think. And even when it is replaced, much more expensive. I went through an article a few months back about rare earths and how some defense firms are buying it for 50 times the price. A lot of the reason for this is just how dirty it is to actually do this. We've moved it offshore so we can all sing Kumbaya and say, look how green we are, not realising we've all got the same fucking atmosphere. But what do the new restrictions mean for the defence and semiconductor industry? Rare earths are crucial for various defence technologies, including F-35 fighter jets, Virginia and Columbia class submarines, Tomahawk missiles, radar systems, Predator unmanned aerial vehicles, and joint attack munitions series of smart bombs. Again, I can't see a single problem with being very reliant on your largest competitor for your fucking stealth fighter jets, your long-range missiles, your radars, your thermal, or your submarines. I'm seeing no issue in this. The US is already struggling to keep pace in the production of these systems, of just in general of these systems. Meanwhile, China is rapidly scaling up its munitions manufacturing capacity and acquiring advanced weapon platforms and equipment at a rate estimated to be 5 or 6 times faster than the US. The manufacturing is unbelievable. The newly announced restrictions represent China's most consequential measures to date, targeting the defence sector. Under these rules, December 1, companies with any affiliation to foreign militaries, including those of the US, will largely be denied export licenses. So if Australia want to build X, of course, we're in bed with the US, we're going to be in strife to make this. The Ministry of Commerce also made clear any requests that use rare earths for military purposes will be automatically rejected. In effect, the policy seeks to prevent direct or indirect contributions of Chinese origin, rare earths or related technologies to foreign defence supply chains. Even before the latest measures, US defence industrial base faced significant challenges, limited production capacity and limited ability to rapidly scale to meet rising defence technology needs. The new restrictions will only deepen these vulnerabilities, further widen the capability gap and allowing China to accelerate the expansion of its military strength. This is going to have problems in everything from drone industry to missiles to whatever, and the flow-on effects as well, not wanting, with Russia, with Ukraine, with Europe, of course, everyone trying to build military at the moment, of course, it starts increasing prices. Additionally, export license applications for rare earth materials used in highly advanced technologies, including sub-14 nanometer semiconductors, next-generation memory chips, and semiconductor manufacturing or testing equipment, will now be subject to case-by-case review by Chinese authorities. I'm guessing not much is going to come through. The individualized review process gives Chinese authorities significant discretion to delay, deny, or condition exports, effectively introducing a new layer of strategic control over a global supply of rare earth inputs critical to advanced computing and defense technologies. The way around this would actually be to invade a country next door and then start pulling chips out of washing machines, because we've seen how effective that has actually been. But in seriousness, this is a serious thing. We're seeing the markets react in the severity of this. What is the US doing to build its rare earth and permanent magnet capabilities to reduce China's leverage? The Novion Magnetics is currently the only manufacturer of rare earth magnets in the US. They have signed a memorandum of understanding to establish a strategic partnership focused on building a scalable domestic supply chain. The Department of War, Department of Defense invested $400 million into equity of MP Materials, also having like a 10-year price floor commitment as well, so it doesn't just skyrocket. The Department of War entered a 10-year off-take and 100% of the facility's magnet output. It will take time to ramp up these capabilities. Until then, China retains a significant amount of leverage over supply chains crucial for national and economic security. And I see people in my Telegram today being like, yeah, well, that's fine, US can do this. The US has the product in the ground. It has some of the mines. The rest of it, we see from this, is still like a 10-year off-ramp to get off these products. We see this from back in April when we did talk about this a little bit more. We spoke about it on my channel. This impacts from tungsten in armor-piercing rounds to gallium in radars. This is very, very broad. China has dominated rare earth mining and processing, but this latest decision tightens the faucet on materials needed for technologies ranging from hypersonic guidance systems to cancer treatments. These products and metals in semiconductors, infrared optics, and armor-piercing munitions. This gallium, the mineral, plays a big role in GPS navigation as well as radars. I believe it does in a lot of thermal equipment too. But the choke point for the US is not mining, it's refinement. The US often ships raw mineral precursors to China for processing and re-imports them as components. With Beijing's 24 export bans now expanded to include tungsten and tellurium, the loop is closing. Even antimony mined in Australia becomes unusable for US systems if refined in China. And this was back then, but you can see we're just pointing out the issues, the frictions, the tensions that this has. And this is why we see this will affect this conflict that we are witnessing now, but also global markets, global tensions, dividing lines. Also, this is why I wanted to show you this. This was from the GAO, the US Government Accountability Office. I know that's a paradox in itself. I wonder what they think about the fucking island that was being run. But either way, let's have a look. The DoD, this was back in 23, but still relevant. It gives us an idea, has assessed there would be a high potential for harm and national security in the event of supply chain disruption. Most of these materials are mined and processed in China, which makes the DoD's weapons system programs vulnerable to supply chain disruptions by an adversary nation. And we get this chart here from 23. You can just see the volume of rare earths from China, from Burma, Myanmar, of course, massive links in China as well, India and Russia as well, where Australia, US and Thailand sit. So you can get an idea of who has fingers in what pies and the reliance on these. Then down here, the notional use of rare earths and critical materials in DoD weapons systems. And we go over the rare earth critical material, magnets, resolution of energy storage, the DoD use, Department of Defense use from control electronic motors, electric drive motors, targeting weapons, radar, sonar, radiation, chemical detection, EW, direct energy weapons. Example of the weapons used: fighter jets, Navy ships, submarine, joint attack munitions, lasers, laser targeting, radar, sonar, jamming. You get the gist of just how in-depth this actually goes. Again, it's ridiculous there's ever this amount of reliance. But now that you're in this, China, they are responding to this, the initial American tariffs and the growth of China and this sovereignty independence, and trying to do what the US is trying to become more sovereign and independent away from other supply chains. And we see the tariffs and trying to bring businesses back. China's doing a very similar thing. The difference is, when the US do it, we clap and celebrate for sovereignty independence. When China do it, we say it's strategic war posturing. Okay? A lot of China's decisions, which are just sovereign decisions, people take as strategically setting up for war. Now, does it have a strategic sense? It may do, but it may not be the primary focus. I spoke about this when Biden spoke that the Chinese government is subsidizing BYD electric vehicles to undermine Tesla or undermine American EVs. Now, what I say is good business is not intrinsically strategy. Can it have strategic then effect? Yeah, absolutely. But you can't just take everything as, yep, this is to go to war. But China is a massive player. And I think many people are stuck in the 90s or 2000s thinking, including Mr. President Donald Trump, for the actual power of China, international markets, and ability to be sovereign and independent in creating systems also, and the actual reliance on Chinese critical components and manufacturing as well. But the flow-on effects, and as well who actually pays tariffs, I think too, is still not clear in a lot of people's eyes. Now, completely onto something else, but I always track this because it's worth keeping up with. Aussie Defender has posted, Trump, Finnish President Stubb, signed a memorandum of understanding at the White House on Thursday regarding an agreement acquisition of 11 new icebreaker vessels for the Coast Guard. Finnish companies will build 4 of these. They'll leverage Finnish expertise to then make some in Texas. Now, a deal is just over $6 billion. The first will enter in 2028, and NATO to bolster regional security in the Arctic, and Russia and China continue to advance efforts to exploit the area for shipping and military means. Now, what I will say is that what is getting made between Finland and America, these are not nuclear icebreakers. Now, we see Russia operate both nuclear and non-nuclear icebreakers in different senses, but your nuclear icebreakers, there's a few advantages to these. They are significantly larger, therefore more powerful in the momentum to break through, therefore thicker ice. Also, some of the emission standards that have been put up in the Arctic region, where diesel ships do struggle to actually get past emission standards into there. North Sea route, China leveraging on the only country in the world who makes nuclear icebreakers and is significantly further ahead in the production of these than if someone was to begin now. China working with Russia for more Arctic power. As Russia is an Arctic power, China is becoming a near Arctic power. As we know that the climate is shifting, I don't care if you think it's man-made or cyclic, I don't give a shit when talking about that, but we know the climate is shifting. A lot more resources become available in there. As tensions in the Middle East rise, and it will continue rising everywhere, shipping lanes through the Red Sea, Suez Canal around Africa gets more difficult. North Sea route opens up China into Europe and other areas in Asia, fucks over Australia a little bit, but larger icebreakers to move through that sector. That will be where a lot of eyes are. This is why Trump talks about Greenland so much and why China is pouring a lot of money in to gain some Russian expertise in this field. It's worth just looking at and keeping up to date with these. Legends, have a fantastic day. Let me know what stocks you're buying on Monday morning, but look after yourselves. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.